Hello again. In today's program, we're concentrating on some of the needs of handicapped teenagers and young adults. But what are the problems faced by handicapped young people and their families? We asked a consultant psychiatrist to define some of them. Dr. Kenneth Day.
Adolescence is a critical stage in everybody's development, and it poses problems to all teenagers and their parents. But for handicapped teenagers and their parents, there are special problems. It's not easy to deal with the teenager by himself. You've really got to deal with the teenager and his parents as a family unit and help them together to help themselves, because parents have a lot of adjusting to do at this stage. They've probably grown accustomed to a fairly settled period when the child is at school, when they've got services, when they've got information available to them, and they've probably settled back and almost forgotten that they've got a handicapped child. But once that child starts to grow up and school leaving looms on the horizon, then a whole set of new problems arise. Parents have to face again the fact they've got a handicapped child and all that this implies. Perhaps the biggest problem they have really is in understanding their child and coping with a teenager who wants to be normal but can't, in getting a balance between allowing him independence, allowing him to go out, and at the same time providing the necessary supervision and support. And this is an area where far too many parents are overprotective. The average teenager takes the initiative from his parents. He goes and does things, he chooses his own clothes, his style of living, he stays out late at night, he gets on the backs of motorbikes and all the other sorts of things, gets into scraps, comes back cut and bruised, and parents accept it. But a handicapped child is in a very difficult position. He can't take this initiative, and his parents, being naturally protective, don't allow him to do this. And it's very important that parents do take this initiative and allow some reasonable risks, allow him to go out and get into trouble a little bit, allow the handicapped teenager to benefit from his own mistakes, really.
So one crucial problem is the need to get out and about, the need to make friends. One of the ways of doing this is to join a club, preferably one which welcomes both disabled and able-bodied members. Later in the program, we'll be talking about the opportunities which exist for doing this. And to show just one example, we made a film about two disabled teenagers who have made new friends through an interest in sport. Canoeing is a sport which is well suited to disabled people who have good arm movement and balance. Lisa and John are two handicapped teenagers who have joined the Alton Canoe Club in Hampshire.
Right, tighten it to suit yourself. No, the other way. Bow into the water. That's fine, lovely. That'll do. Not the bow. Yeah. John. Stand by, Dick. This chap's capsized.
We spoke to the president of the club. He's a further education advisor, Brian Barton.
I've been teaching at the Trelaw College for about 8 years. It's a special school in Alton for handicapped children. Lisa's been canoeing with me now for about 6 years, and John has been with me for a little over a year. Both of them very competent canoeists, and have now progressed to join Alton Canoe Club, which is an ordinary local canoe club with a wide range of members.
Well, down there's plenty of people our age, 16 and 17-year-olds, and being sort of in the water, we have the same capabilities as they have, and we get on quite well with them. There's plenty of friends down there.
It started off with swimming at home. I told my mother I wanted to do swimming. She said, sure, great. Then, when I came to the school, I'd done canoeing. I goes, I've been doing canoeing for about 2 weeks. He goes, what, canoeing?
We asked Brian Barton about safety precautions.
I don't normally like to do any canoeing until I'm assured by the head of the school physical education department that the girls and boys are water competent. They have some form of award in personal survival. I've got one criteria before taking people canoeing, and that is that they must be able to be rescued.
Come forward a bit.
There should be the right angle there, coming 45 degrees.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
Capsizing drills are an important aspect of safety precautions. This particular drill is called an Eskimo rescue.
Well done. Very good.
We spend a lot of time in the swimming pool at the school working on rescue techniques, people being able to get out of the canoe when they capsize and that sort of thing. And having mastered those skills, we then go on open water and do normal canoeing.
It's something different. You're in the water, you're free. That's what I found.
Try and keep the centre of gravity of your paddle a little bit lower. That's lovely. Good. Fine. Good. Try and use all the blade.
Once you took a certain nib swimming exam, then you could go canoeing if you wanted to, and it's a challenge. So I thought, well, why not? My parents have always encouraged me. My father, he's a very good swimmer anyway, so he encouraged me to swim at an early age. And then when I came to this school, I said, I'm going to take up canoeing. He said, oh, great. I'm not sure whether my mum was a bit dubious about it at first, but I think once I've actually started, it was fine.
John is starting to coach other members, younger members of the club, in some of the basic canoeing techniques.
Move your right hand slightly down the paddle. Your right hand slightly down the paddle, that's it. Making the same length apart.
I'm trying to join a club at home at the moment because there's plenty of canoe clubs around the area. And I'm not too sure whether it's going to be a mixed, able-bodied and handicapped, or whether it's just going to be an ordinary club.
I would say that if any club, any normal canoeing club, would take the trouble to take these people on board as members after they've left school, they would find they would be getting some good canoeists joining them. The only factor is they need a little bit of help sometimes to get to the water and a bit of help to get off the water. Having said that, once afloat, they're the same as anyone else.
Being away from home, it's very difficult because you haven't got any friends there to start off with, which means that you've really got to make the effort to go out and meet the other people. They're not going to sort of come to you and say, oh, hello. It's up to you to sort of go out and meet them, go to places where you can meet them.
Lisa and John are fortunate. Their parents have encouraged them to get out and make friends. We spoke to Lisa's parents and asked, first of all, how they felt about their daughter taking part in sports such as canoeing.
Well, Lisa's been encouraged to take part in sports from a very early age. She's received a good training in all the sports she takes part in. For instance, canoeing, she's been taught to swim. She knows how to swim very well. She's a very competent swimmer. She's had good training in canoe techniques and rescue techniques. In actual fact, I think there's less danger involved in the sport of canoeing than there is in, for instance, when she pours boiling water to make a cup of tea.
At the moment, the main problem is that she is away at school most of the time, and in the holiday periods there are no facilities for clubs. A lot of them close down during holiday times. But she has got some local friends, and She's encouraged to join outside activities, and she hopes to take part in more once she leaves school and she is at home more often.
Well, it's done her good being at Florence to law school, and of course now they are sending her out to sixth form college, which allows her to mix with physically able-bodied people. She's coping with it very well, and she's enjoying the new friendships she makes with the people in the school.
Well, since I've been going there, which is a year now, I was very shy when I first went there, sort of very introverted. But since I've been going there, I've met more friends, I've come out of myself. I'm going out and I'm talking to other people, and they've accepted me, and I've, learnt to sort of get on with other people now. And it's much better now, I've got lots of friends there. And we go out, to parties and discos and things. Just the same as anybody else would, really.
Our first guest today is Norman Croucher, who is a well-known disabled sportsman and indeed a mountaineer. He's writing a book about outdoor pursuits for disabled people. Norman, we've seen how Lisa's enjoying a recreation and sport like canoeing, but what facilities exist in Britain today?
Well, as far as possible, disabled people should have the use of the same facilities as anyone else in the community, but of course we've got to be realistic. The old bugbear of access crops up frequently. There are certain buildings and water spaces that people can't get to. And also we've got to be realistic in the sense that there are certain activities that are not suitable. If I illustrate it, for instance, by using the example of someone who wants to be a wrestler or a parachutist, if they've got brittle bones, is not a very wise thing. So not everything is available.
What about sports centres? Are these becoming more accessible?
I think in the past few years there's been a greater awareness. There is certainly improved access in most sports centres. It's not, though, however, a complete picture across the board. It's very patchwork. In some centres you can get into parts of them and not others, so that you can integrate to an extent, but perhaps once you've finished your games you can't go to the bar to have a drink with other people unless you're carried up the stairs.
Are there any schemes to involve disabled people in sport?
Well, there are many specialist schemes. These are very good in their own right in many cases, and they also help integration in that if a person learns a skill, let's say such as canoeing, on a special course or at a special centre, they then can go to a club and join the ordinary club. I always think if a person turns up at a canoe club and they're a complete novice and also they're a stranger to the club, they may be a bit reticent about making the approach. If they're also handicapped, it's even more difficult. So if they can learn the basic skills, then they maybe feel a little more inclined to approach a club still as a stranger, but at least they're not a novice.
How do you find out about the scope of activities available?
The various systems can concentrate first on sport, although I think we shouldn't just look at sport. We ought to bear in mind that different people have different leisure aspirations. It might be chess, it might be music, it might not be participating in sport, it might be, for instance, as a spectator at a football match. But dealing first with sport, there is the British Sports Association for the Disabled, which can supply information on a vast number of specialist clubs or integrated provision. Also, the Disabled Living Foundation has an information service which deals with sport and very broad leisure opportunities. And sticking to sport again, if people approach their local sports council, they can usually be put in touch with clubs, governing bodies of sport, various associations which can give them advice on where they can get in. It's very important, I think, in the local areas to remember that libraries, citizens' advice bureaus, social workers may well be able to do this, and of course the local organisations for disabled people, or the specialist bodies that deal with one handicap. For instance, if we're talking of say spastics, the Spastic Society then very often has lots of information. It is, I think, for the handicapped person a little more difficult. Sometimes they've got to show more initiative, and they must hunt for the information. It's
yes, hunting for information is a difficult thing at times, isn't it?
Right.
I recently started to do a bit of gliding myself, and that took me 15 years to find out about it. And it's amazing the sense of release you get participating in a sport like this, to have the wheelchair taken away and get strapped into something completely new.
Yes.
What about the safety aspects of some sports, such as sub-aqua diving?
Yes, I think provided people are instructed by the normal instructor, who is a qualified instructor or coach of the governing body in question, and in some cases the coach will also need the supportive advice of somebody who understands the handicap. Now, if we're talking of a blind person who's going to go canoeing, which some people do, they perhaps follow the sound of a bell ringing, that blind individual himself is able to tell the instructor sufficient about his handicap. But I think in some cases, and sub-aqua is one, you need also a medical opinion because it's quite complicated. You need a good examination, and a person may not even know that there is perhaps something which isn't particularly functioning too well without having a medical examination.
Do you think that participation in sports leads to better integration?
I think generally it does. It doesn't always happen, but there is a great tendency towards this. I think it's a question of, just like anyone else, the more you meet people, the more you make purposeful use of your leisure time, the more you enjoy, the more you exercise, the more you have the opportunities for fulfillment like anyone else. Integration and forming relationships can be a part of it.
Thank you, Norman Croucher.
Thank you.
Of course, joining clubs isn't the whole answer. A handicapped person has the same need to love and be loved as anyone else. And this is a subject which parents and professionals frequently tend to ignore. We asked Dr. Day about this.
In terms of sex education and sex counselling, I think the handicapped youngsters are rather poorly served at the moment. There is not a good sex education programme at the moment in all schools and indeed in young adult facilities. Parents themselves often feel embarrassed about this area and unable to discuss it with the handicapped child, and may mistakenly believe that it's wrong to open up the area at all, which will cause perhaps discomfort and embarrassment and raise hopes and cause frustrations.
This brings us to our second guest, Dr. Wendy Greengrass, a doctor who's made a special study of sexual and emotional problems and is chairman of SPOD, which stands for Sexual and Personal Relationships of the Disabled. Dr. Greengrass, can you tell us about some of the problems that parents and young people face in this very sensitive area?
Well, I think one of the first things I'd like to pick up is this question of sexual frustration. You don't avoid sexual frustration by keeping people away from sex. Everybody has a need for friendship and for close relationships with another person. And I think that this is something that is to be encouraged so that people can experience it. And this, in a way, I think, is part of the whole question that, to a certain extent, I think that parents have got to take the initiative as far as this is concerned. And they've got to begin to believe themselves that their child should be able and capable of living as, in some way, as near normally as other children. So that when they become, say, in their 20s or 30s, that it should be a natural progression, that they should be expected to leave home and live independently or live with other people of their own age, which is the norm for able-bodied youngsters, that they should be able to have friendships and experience marriage, sexuality, and all the other things that really go to make life worthwhile, and not to be the sort of, in the situation of feeling, well, they're going to live with me until I die, and then what's going to happen after I'm dead, which is a very negative attitude to take altogether.
But apart from parents, who else should provide sexual education?
Well, I think the schools should have a primary responsibility as far as this is concerned, and the schools that aren't doing it, I think, again, it's the parents to insist that the young people get this. It isn't only a question of just being given knowledge about sex and what happens and sexual attitudes, but it's also, I think, an opportunity for youngsters to explore what they really feel, what they really think, and then begin to look at the reality of their own situation, to be able to look at what are the real limitations that are imposed on them by their disability.
Obviously, it's a very, very sensitive area, but what is the reality of the situation in Britain today?
Well, I think that for everybody there is a shortage of skilled help. But help is available if parents try hard enough. And one of the things that they've got to do, I think, is to, if you like, encourage their doctors and their social workers to be willing to discuss the problems as they arise, the problems possibly when the youngsters are much younger, when about problems about menstruation, about wet dreams, about masturbation, to be able, because most of the problems aren't really major problems. They're just the ordinary sort of things that everybody, and anxieties that all parents go through at some stage. As far as the other matters are concerned, when it comes to, I think, more skilled help, then we're not only looking at the problems of this particular age group, but I think of all age groups. And probably the main problem that all disabled people are up against is the fact that they do have such a small circle of acquaintances. So the first thing that parents need to do is, as Norman was suggesting, by indulging physical activity, but to encourage their children to make friends, to go to clubs, to mix with as many people as they possibly can.
And who can parents turn to if they need help and advice in this situation?
Well, I think the places they should go is, first of all, I think the self-help groups, so that spina bifida groups, multiple sclerosis groups, spinal injury groups, all these people have an enormous amount of information about the particular disabilities. And I think these are the people that parents should approach, first of all. The next line is probably family planning clinics. There are family planning clinics in all areas, and there always doctors and nurses and other people who will give time to talk with disabled people themselves or with parents about particular sexual or emotional problems. Failing that, or if more help is needed, then they could get in touch with SPOD, who have a list of counsellors. Unfortunately, there aren't an enormous number of counsellors over the country, but SPOD does know of the counsellors who are available. Also, as far as books and leaflets and material that has been written, and about films and slides. And then, if the problem is really very severe for an individual, then possibly they should try psychosexual clinics. And there's a directory of psychosexual clinics that can be available from BAC.
Just remind us, what is BAC?
A British Association of Counselling.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greengrass.
Thank you.
We've prepared a leaflet giving information about leisure facilities and organisations which can help with sexual and emotional problems. If you'd like a copy, please send a large stamped addressed envelope to The Handicapped Family, BBC Television, London W12 8QT. The Handicapped Family, BBC Television, London W12 8QT. Don't forget to send a large stamped addressed envelope, and please write the word relationships on it. Next week we'll be looking at a housing scheme which enabled a group of severely disabled people to live independent lives as part of the community. See you then, I hope.